Today, I will share with you what awaits you when you go into the interview day, that big moment that you have been preparing for. Now, the interview day starts in a very light way. So the first thing that the consulting firms do, for example, BCG and McKinsey, is hosting a company presentation where you can relax and you can enjoy yourself. After that, around 30 minutes, that's when the actual interview starts. But not the case interview. The first thing before the case interview is the problem-solving test. In BCG, it's called the potential test. McKinsey calls it the problem-solving test. It's pretty much the same thing. What happens is 45 minutes of solving quantitative problems in front of a computer with no calculation. Now, I will not focus so much on this today. I will leave that for another episode. What I want to speak with you today about is precisely on the case interview and demystifying what happens inside that interview. Normally, the first round will include 2 or even 3 case interviews, and they last around 45 to 50 minutes. And in those interviews, you will be tested on the way you can solve problems and communicate solutions. So those are the 2 things that the interviewer will be assessing. So how does it work? When you arrive there, the first thing that happens is a small chat and then the personal experience part. The personal experience is around 15, maximum 20 minutes. And the interviewer will be focused on assessing your behavioral skills, your interests, your motivations. And there are 2 skills that are extremely important. So be prepared to answer those. The first one is leadership. For example, your interviewer will ask you, tell me about a time where you had to lead a group of people to achieve something. He may ask you the question, or he may actually take something, pick an example from your CV and ask you about that. For example, I see that you managed this division unit. Tell me about what was the most interesting thing you achieved there. So leadership is one skill. The second skill is drive. How driven are you? How ambitious? How perseverant are you? So your interviewer may ask you, tell me about a time where you experienced, or tell me about a time where you set a challenging goal for yourself. What was that goal? What did you do? What was the result you got? But again, he can also pick something from your CV and then ask you about that. That's why it's important that you have a very well polished and concise CV. Now, besides the behavioral skills, your interviewer is also interested in your motivation. So he will also ask you, why do you want to be a consultant? And why BCG or McKinsey or Bain? Why now? Why not later? Why not before? And finally, why this specific office? Why Copenhagen office? Why London office? So the behavioral skills and your motivations, your interests are what is assessed in the personal experience. After that, you get into the case interview, which starts with a very open-ended question, a business situation. For example, your client is a retail store. Profits are going down, foot traffic is going down, what should you do? And when you receive an open question like this, there are a series of steps that you need to take to solving that problem. The first one, you need to define it. Because when you hear it for the first time, it is too broad, it is too vague. It's like trying to eat an entire chicken all at once. You need to cut it into pieces and then digest it. And that's what you do when you first define the problem, so you understand what it is, and then you structure it. So the structuring is precisely the breaking down of the problem. Now, why is defining such an important step that many candidates miss? Because it's tempting to go right away into solution mode. But the problem is, if you do that, you may miss some important elements. Let me give you an example. An example about tomatoes. 50 years ago, there was a big problem with tomatoes. The farmers were picking the tomatoes and they were getting damaged. So they phrased the problem as, how can we improve the picking of the tomatoes so that we don't damage those? However, it is hard to improve the picking because they were so sensitive that no matter how careful the workers were, they would get damaged. Now, if you define the problem in a different way, if you define it in a more broad way, ultimately, what do you want? You want to ensure that you have tomatoes that are not damaged, tomatoes that are good to be sold. And if you open the question in that way, all of a sudden, it's not only the picking. You can actually solve the problem by coming up with a variety that is more resistant, so that it doesn't get damaged. Or you can come up with a solution that relies on equipment and technology rather than human picking of those tomatoes. So this example shows you how important it is to define the problem in the right way. The way you define the problem determines the quality of your solution. So once you do that, then you can start addressing the problem, breaking it down like this chicken, breaking it down into component parts, and then analyzing each of those parts independently. Now, the right way to structure a problem is by asking a series of questions that, when taken together, allow you to find a solution. For example, if the question is that the revenues went down for your client, the grocery store, then you could ask a series of questions like, how has the number of customers evolved over time? How is the basket, the average spend for each of those consumers, evolving over time? And then you dig deeper into those elements. For example, how do we compare versus our competitors? How is our brand perception in the eyes of our consumers? What do consumers want, etc., etc. So this is the structuring part. Now, where does it end? You can start structuring indefinitely. The structuring ends when you can come up with a series of analyses that you would do. For example, if I want to compare our client's situation, our client foot traffic, to the competitors, I can do a benchmark. I can look at the market. I can just go to a competitor and count the number of people that go into a store and then average that by the size of the store. So a good issue tree, a good structuring of the problem is one that results in an analysis that you can do. An analysis is precisely the third step in the case. Then you will start analyzing the series of issues that you identified. And in the analysis, the important thing to keep in mind is always ask the question, what does this mean for my client? When I realize that a certain product category is not selling anymore, what does that mean? Is it because it's the wrong product category? Is it because it's not well placed, well advertised? Is it that the quality is not good? What does this mean for the client? What is the implication? What should he do about it? Should he get the product out of the store? Should he put it in a different place? What should the client do? And this is a time where you can come up with a hypothesis that you can then validate throughout the case. And then the fourth step is to end the case. There's a beginning and there's an ending. Ending the case with a recommendation. Telling your client this is what you should do, based on everything that we have been analyzing. And a good recommendation is a recommendation that is practical, it's pragmatic, it's actionable. It's something that your client can do tomorrow. It's not a conceptual and analytical solution. And an excellent solution is one that also incorporates the mindsets, the capabilities that your client will need to develop in order to implement that solution. For example, if you want to cut costs, you can give your client an analytical solution saying, these are the areas where you can cut costs, and this is how much you can cut the costs. But what about the mindsets? If you want to be a cost leader, the mindset of finding opportunities to cut costs and execute on them. What are the mindsets and the capabilities that your client needs to develop in order to do that? So if you do these four things, you will be on your way to have a successful case. Now, take a look at the video where I uncover 4 secrets that you can use in those steps so you can get a good outcome in your case interviews.